Today's interview is with Vincent Gethings. Vincent is living out in Honolulu, Hawaii. Not a bad place to live, right? But he's in the military out there and he's transitioning into civilian life. But he started investing in real estate a few years back now and started building his own portfolio of one, two, and three, and four units. And he got to 20 units and realized the scalability of it wasn't there and is now investing in multifamily deals. He bought a 52 unit start off with and has now, I think, around 500 units. So has grown himself a sizable portfolio. So he talks about how he's done that, as well as some management tips on how you can manage your on your rentals better. So really interesting. So if you want to manage your rental portfolio better, if you want to scale to bigger units, or just you're interested in real estate, this is a great interview for you. So stick around for all of that. Hello and welcome to Wrestling with Real Estate, where we look to chokeslam all your real estate problems. I'm your host, former WWE wrestler and now Cirque du Soleil performer, and of course, multifamily real estate investor, Barri Griffiths. Now, today we're joined by Vincent Gethings. Hey, Vincent, how are you doing, man?
Hey, Barry, how are you?
I'm doing awesome, man. I'm doing awesome. Interestingly enough, we were just chatting off air, and seems like your surname has some Welsh roots to it. So we have a connection there as well. So that's pretty cool. That's
yeah, absolutely
interesting to find out. Well, cool, man. Well, hey, thank you for making the time. You're out in Honolulu, Hawaii, just to make anyone jealous, including myself who's listening. But I appreciate you taking the time. And before we dive into today's conversation, do you want to just give us an idea about your background and what you've been up to?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am currently active duty Air Force. Been in for about 14 and a half years, aircraft maintenance by trade, last few years. I've had the absolute privilege to be what's called a career assistant advisor. So kind of like a professional development coach slash guidance counselor. So really help people, younger airmen, as we call them, really understand what their why is, what their goals are, help them roadmap. And a lot of my people that I see are usually 18 to 24. So just starting life, just starting a career, and they really don't know what they want to get after. So I help them, identify that and give them the tools and resources and means to get after what their goals are and really just understand their whys, get clarity and things like that. So it's been an absolute honor serving in this position. All things come to an end. So my this job is only good for about 3 or 4 years and got to transition out. I'm choosing to transition all the way out of the Air Force and become a civilian again and do real estate full time. So with my real estate company, Tri-City Equity Group, we started a few years ago with a few partners I met out here in Honolulu. We have about 340 units right now in a couple different cities, mainly do syndications and joint ventures. And we're scaling, and we have a few targeted markets, and we're going to continue to scale and do this full time. So 2021 is going to be a great year for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, congratulations on all your success, and thank you for your service as well, man. Everyone in the military, I have nothing but the utmost respect for all of them. How did you get started, though? How did you first? You mentioned, I think, that there was a few people out there in Honolulu that kind of sparked that interest in you, but what was that path into that first property?
Yeah, the first property. So veterans have what's called the VA home loan. So I used that I was actually in Travis Air Force Base, California, Bay Area, California, and I was stationed there. And I used my VA home loan, and I got into what's called the VA house hack. So what that is use your VA home loan to buy a house that is essentially a fixer-upper, because VA home loan, you can get into a house, zero money down. So you get into this house, zero money down, it's a fixer-upper, you move in and you kind of fix it up, you rehab it, renovate it as you live there for a couple of years. And then when you sell it, it's tax-free because it was your primary residence. So that's what I did. Made about $130,000 off that, cleared that tax-free. And then at that time I had Rich Dad, Poor Dad hand it to me. And I was like, all right, because I was going to just put it all in the stock market. And I was like, all right, nope, real estate is the way to go. So Rich Dad, Poor Dad evolved into Bigger Pockets, read all Brandon Turner's books. Because at the time, they were kind of the biggest name out at the time. A lot of the other coaching groups like, Joe Fairless, Rod Khleif, Brad Shumrock, Jake and Gino. They weren't really out yet at the time, or they weren't really that big. And I probably had some limited beliefs at that time too, as most people do. So I did the small multifamily stuff, duplexes, fourplexes, things like that. Took that 130,000, liquidated my brokerage account, took all that and bought 20 duplexes and fourplexes in Michigan. And that was where I got started. And then I hit that was 2016 to 2018. So I bought 20 units, 2016, 2018. At 2018, I hit a wall in my investment career. I couldn't, grow past that 20 units. Everything kind of went down to a crawl, kind of maxed out the knowledge I had at the time. So I realized I need to go back and get some more education because I can't get over this hurdle. I need to go back. And at that point, I found Jake and Gino, Wheelbarrow Profits Academy, went through their program. That was 2018. By 2019, I formed Tri-City Equity Group with my partners. We closed 52 units in 2019. And then in 2020, that first 52 units was kind of like the beta test, that let's build the process, build the systems, test everything out, get everything right. And then once it's good and you have like that proof of concept, 2020 came around. We really was like, okay, we're going to unleash this thing. And we closed 4 deals in 2020, essentially quadrupling our portfolio. And then it's continuing into 2021 with that kind of mid-sized multifamily, 50 to 100 unit property range is what we're at now.
Very cool, man. Very cool. Why was it Michigan that you chose to go for? So you're in California, right? And I'm sure prices are not cheap and it's not ideal for rental, to build a rental portfolio in that area, right? But what was it that attracted you to Michigan?
Great question, actually. A lot of people get focused on, and they need to buy in their backyard. Well, if your backyard's, Bay Area, California, you're not going to be buying much, right? So, or maybe your backyard is a very depressed economy or something like that. So in Michigan, even though it's not the best market out there as far as like population growth, job growth, things like that, those key metrics, I had a competitive advantage in there. And that was that outweighed market performance with my knowledge I had at the time. And the competitive advantage was my wife's family was from there and they knew everything about the area. So the area wasn't bad, wasn't the best, but I know I could call my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law, my mother-in-law, like, hey, I'm looking at this fourplex on this street. And they're like, nope, that's a crack house. Like, don't worry about it. Like, I'll save you all the time now. Just skip that one. So having that boots on the ground, as we call them, right? That boots on the ground, somebody that you can trust, somebody that's been in that market for 30, 40, 50 years, that family, they knew every street, every house, everything. And they can do drive-by, they can do videos for me. So that competitive advantage outweighed the market metrics for me starting. If I could easily went into, Florida or something like that, but I would have been, to me, that was a lot more riskier taking on, going into a market where I didn't know anybody, didn't have anything. Not saying it can't be done. It absolutely can be done. But at the time starting, having that trust, having that boots on the ground was more important starting out. So that's why I chose Michigan.
And that's a great point. And I think something that everyone should consider, right? For one, going out of state, it's sometimes something that you have to do, right? It's kind of, you can make anything work in any market essentially, right? But sometimes it just makes more sense. I did the same thing. I went from Las Vegas and invested in the Midwest into essentially Cincinnati, and it just makes more sense sometimes, right? You've got to live where you want and invest where it makes sense, where the numbers make sense. I think that's a real estate radio's guy quote, but it's a great quote and it's true. But what you also want to consider when you're trying to find a market is, how can you have some kind of unfair advantage, right? Because you can pick any market you want, right? And it's, and you can make it work regardless, even if you don't have an unfair. But if you can find an unfair advantage over the competition, right? And yours was having that boots on the ground, having that market knowledge through other people. You want to try and leverage that to the best of your ability, because it does help you. It does make a difference to your success. So I think it's really cool that you were able to do that. How were you able to buy these 20 units? Were you buying them through wholesalers, using hard money, or were you just going through the MLS, putting 20% down? How did you grow that portfolio to that 20 units?
It was a combination of MLS and direct to seller. So I'd say about probably 50-50. We're just on market, and the other one's just through a direct seller campaign, which actually worked really well with the small, so the sub, 5 units, the duplexes and
Mhm.
fourplexes type properties. Um, One of the cool strategies, I don't know where I read this, one of the books was go to their ads like on Craigslist and say, hi, I'm not looking to rent, but if you're looking to sell, I'm a qualified buyer. Here's my pre-approval letter. Like, let's do a deal. And I actually bought like 3 or 4 properties that way of just reaching out to the sellers through their ads. Um, I haven't really had a whole lot of, everybody's like, oh, the mail campaigns and all that stuff. I did that for years and never really gained any traction. So I don't know if like the actual letters and all that stuff is really a thing these days. So I thought, or I did uh, the ads. So I just went to their ads and said, hey, if you're looking to sell, if you're tired and looking to move on, I'll pay you a great price. No agents involved, no fees, just me and you. Let's do a deal, and that worked. On 3 or 4 deals. So
That's cool. That's a great. So you would literally just calling these ads up. You go to Craigslist, find all the properties that were for rent, and what would you just literally call all of them and then figure out what area they were, or would you look them up and would you put the ones that you want in the list? Did you have more
I,
detail?
I, I narrowed it down first, kind of ones that met my criteria first, especially like a duplex. So it'd be like a duplex next to this really good high school or this really good college or something like that. I would kind of target those nicer areas first, and then call those. So I'd have a short list of maybe 10 to 20 like duplex or fourplexes, and I would just call the ads and ask the owners because a lot of times those small properties are going to be owner managed. They're not big enough to really afford um, a property manager. So it's
Mm-hmm.
usually the mom and pop type. They might be an engineer or something or a doctor in the town, and they got a couple real estate things because their CPA told them to buy, some rentals, right? And that's usually who these people were. And yeah, like, hey, you're looking to retire? Like, I'll retire you right now, or from the property at least. And then it worked. So
Very cool, man. That's awesome. I like that strategy. And how were you financing these? Were you just going traditional financing, or were you using some other kind of creative methods?
I'm very creative. So at first, I did just conventional loans. So 20% down, you buy a duplex. 20% down, you buy a duplex. Then you run out of that for a couple reasons. One, with conventional, you can only you're maxed out at the number of conventionals you can get. So then I had to get creative for there. And the way I got creative, I did some seller financing, some private lending, um, and then some after that. Then I did what's called a blanket loan. So I took all my conventionals because my credit was essentially destroyed after 4 or 5 conventional loans. Like, I can't get a car because my DTI was at like 90%,
Yeah.
right? So I was like, well, they didn't talk about this in the book. So I was like, I need to solve this problem. So then I went to a local community lender. I was like, hey, I got these 5, properties, all unconventional, destroying my credit. What can we do? So we took the 5 and we wrapped them up into a blanket loan. So started an LLC, put them all on a blanket loan, cleared them off my personal credit profile, and then I held them in that as a one blanket loan for a few years until I started selling them off.
With a blanket loan like that, do you usually pay a higher interest rate or something with something like that?
It is higher, but the flexibility you gain versus like the extra point, it's usually like 100 basis points higher. So where a conventional loan might be, well, at the time they were kind of like low fours. I know mine might have been like 5.3. So it's not going to be like crazy change. Like, yeah, my mortgage went up maybe $100, but to have that flexibility, one, it's off my credit. Two, I have this awesome flexibility of having a local community bank that's financing this, building a relationship with them, because the next year I brought a $1.5 million deal to their table, and they remembered like, oh yeah, we hold 20 of his other units. He's paid on time. He's a great uh, customer, debtor, and yeah, we're gonna give him the loan. So that helped out.
Yeah, very cool. And then you said you got to about 20 units and you got to a hump where you couldn't get over it, right? Sort of in terms of education and sort of maybe mindset as well. Looking back, what do you think that hump was? And did you need mentorship to get over it? Or was it just maybe you? Or like, you know what I mean? I'm interested in that because I'm sure there's a lot of people that have that point, right? There's kind of a little bit of a sticking, they beat a decent sized portfolio. They've had some success. and now they either want to go bigger or they think they should go bigger, but they have that hump maybe that you went through. Maybe talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was like fall 2018, and like I said, it was like a brick wall I hit. Like I was like blowing through everything, and then all of a sudden it was like 20 units and then stop. So some of the issues I had was one, my credit was destroyed because I had 20 units, or at that time I think it was out of the 20 units, I think maybe 13 of them were conventional loans on my personal credit. So my personal credit was bad for my DTI anyway. I was illiquid because everything was in this, all my money was in these 20 units, and they were cash flowing great. But with residential properties, you can't really force the appreciation like you can in commercial and do things like refi and rolls and stuff like that. Like I know there's a BRRRR method, but it's not the same as commercial. Like it's just, you can't compare them. So, and I'll circle back to that because that was one of the issues about the equity and stuff like that. So credit was kind of toast. Cash flow was great, but I was very illiquid. And then I didn't really know anything else how to do commercial. So the jump to commercial seemed it was much bigger in my brain than it was in reality. So then I was like, I made the commitment. I was like, okay, I'm going to go commercial, right? There's a couple things like the kind of the straws that broke the back of like, okay, I'm absolutely done with the small residential properties. I need to go commercial, but I needed the education to get there. And by this time, now there was more groups out there, like the Broadcliffe, Brad Schumrocks, and Joe Fairless's and Jake and Gino's, like all those were starting to become a lot more popular. And then you start seeing, kind of their students have success, because that's everybody's like, well, I don't want to stroke the check. I want to like show somebody that's actually done something with this.
Yeah.
And now their students were starting to come out and like do big things. I'm like, okay, now this is the real deal. Let me get into one of these programs. And once you got in, it's like, oh wow, this isn't really as crazy as you think it is. It definitely, you need the education. You're not just going to be able to fumble your way through, a 100 unit, syndication. You definitely need some kind of education, knowledge there. But once I did that, then it was great. So the 20 units, going back to that, one of the walls that hit me with was when I went to go refinance to get some of that equity out. I was like, okay, I'm not growing fast enough. And I know a lot of people are like what your goal is and what your why is. So having that clarity when I was starting real estate, I didn't really have that clarity. And then I read was like Tim Ferriss's book about the dreamlining and figuring out what your why is and what your end goal is. And at the time, I think it was like $15,000 unit cash flow. And then it's like you work your way backwards. I'm like, okay, or $20,000 a month in cash flow. I was like, here's my cash flow goal. Work my way backwards. How many units do I need? And I'm like, crap, I need like 200 units. I'm at 20. And then that's when it like hit me. I'm like, I'll never get there with duplexes, right? And like that's 10 years away.
Yeah.
And then I was at like a meetup and, talking to the guy that does duplexes and single families. Like, yeah, in like 10 years, you'll be be in a great spot to retire. And I'm like, 10 years, like I want to do this much sooner. Or I think he said 20 years, right? So he's like, in 20 years, you'll be in a great spot to retire. I was like, I want to do this much sooner. I want to quit my job much sooner than that. And then, so that's when it was like, okay, I needed these duplexes, fourplexes, residential is not going to cut it. So I was like, I need to capture equity to go do the larger multifamily. I went to go get a bunch of appraisals on my loans. And then they all came back at like pretty much what I paid for them because they're residential property and not commercial property. So they go off of comp value approach. So comparative value. So the appraiser went out and said, okay, well, this fourplex is worth the same as that fourplex down the street. And that fourplex down the street sold for X. So your house is worth X. And I was like, well, I raised the rents $200. I did all these upgrades. And they're like, that's great, but we don't care. It's comp value approach. So I like on paper, I like just vanished, like $300,000 worth of equity just disappeared. And I was like, well, it's sucks. So that was like kind of the straw, right? That I was talking about earlier. The straw that kind of broke the back on the residential properties was the comp value approach was, having all that just equity just vanish. The only way to really capture it was to sell. So that's when I was like, okay, I'm done with residentials, only going commercial. I'm going to start selling these off, taking that equity and roll into commercial. And that's what I did. So the longest answer to your question.
No, it was a great answer. It was a great answer because it explains a lot, and to some people, they might not realize that, right? They might not realize the different way that each property is valued. The commercial is valued essentially on the income approach, when using the NOI divided by a cap rate. That's another conversation in itself, but essentially that's how it's valued. Whereas commercial, residential, as you pointed out, is you're at the mercy of every house in your street, right?
Yeah.
What do they sell for? What did Mrs. Jones down the street sell for? What did Joe sell for, right? And if they sell cheap, or if there's an issue there and they sell their property because they got to sell quick, and they'll use those comps to value your property, and it really affects your ability to do the cash out refinance and create equity, right? And to force that appreciation, you can't really do it to the same degree in residential. So I think that's a great point, and I think you did a great job of explaining it. What was your first bigger multifamily then? What was your first deal, and how did you get to that first deal?
So the first one, so again, pulling right where I left off. So 2018, fall 2018, got into the Jake and Gino program. 2019, I was like, I'm burning the ships. Like, I'm never going back. Large multifamily or commercial multifamily is the way to go. So January 2019, this 52 unit portfolio came on the market in Michigan, and it was an 8 unit, a 12 unit, and a 32 unit, all packaged together as a 52 unit portfolio. And I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to go after. And talk to the brokers, talk to the seller, visited the property, and we were all for it. Excuse me. And the problem was I didn't have the credibility at the time. And this is, again, one of the things that most people don't realize as they're scaling is, because I went to the tables like, look, I have 20 units, I've done this. And they're like, 20 units of duplexes doesn't mean you know how to run a 52 unit commercial portfolio. And that kind of hit me in the face. I was like, wow, I thought that would have, helped me out a little bit. And it really didn't. So I had to prove to them that, I was a good candidate to buy this property, them being the brokers and the seller. Like, am I wasting their time or not? So to prove to them I wasn't wasting their time, I formed Tri-City Equity Group. Yeah, right there. So Tri-City Equity Group with my friends here in Honolulu. And I was like, look, I will buy the 8 unit cash right now to show you how serious I am. So it was 250,000. We just bought it cash, and that got their attention. And I was like, I'll buy that cash to show you that I'm serious, and that'll give me the time to get the debt on the 12 unit and the 32 unit. And they're like, okay. And then so I got their attention, bought the 8 unit, and then started doing everything with the loan and everything with the bank, who I went back to the same bank I had the 20 units with. So I had the rapport there and everything, that relationship there. And took a couple months to kind of get there, build the business plan, and understand, what I'm doing. And then we ended up closing a few months later. Took a few months to kind of figure this out because we were kind of, building our parachute after we jumped off the cliff. But that's kind of my personality. And we ended up going to the closing table, closing on this property. So it was around 1.5 million. I think it was a little bit less than 1.5 million total. We already had the 8 unit cash. And the way we structured it was I used the 8 unit as my down payment for the other ones.
Oh, wow.
So we re-collateralized the 8 unit. Mm-hmm. So we went to the closing table, re-wrapped up the entire 52 unit portfolio in a loan. The 8 unit was our down payment. So we ended up closing with like $5,000 at the actual closing table. So that's creative financing. That's what those are the strategies you can learn if you get around, if you kind of upgrade your groups, right, that you're with, your network, the education you're at. You're not going to do that, reading or the people that are doing like kind of single family portfolios, like they're not at that space. Nothing wrong with that, but having a strategy like that, being around the kind of those coaching groups that can solve that problem with you, was like the launch pad for the next 2 years. And like I said, since then, we've closed 300 more units and have another 200 under contract today in, April 2021. So that was like the first real deal. And the confidence we got out of that was like, holy crap, we can actually do, like, if we just solved that problem, like we got this.
So that was a real springboard.
Absolutely.
for you guys, I guess, right? To kind of, not only in terms of you guys' confidence, like you mentioned, that belief that you guys can do it, but I'm sure in credibility going forward. Hey, we own 52 units. This is what it looks like. This is what we do. So when you go and buy it, try and buy it another similar size or slightly larger property, you have that track record. You have that. You get people's attentions because they know that you've done it already, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always one of the first questions, especially if you're newer. Brokers always ask, so what do you have? What deals are you in? And that's, I think, one of the benefits of um, kind of like syndication and being a limited partner, because what I did was, to me, was like the long route. Like I bought the single families and I went to the duplex and fourplexes and kind of had a little bit of credibility, but not much, trying to make that big jump. Where my partner Duke, he started his career mainly as a limited partner. So when he put in, he submitted his resume to the bank on our business plan. It was like, "Hi, my name is Duke. I'm a real estate agent, and I'm partnering 500 and something units." They're like, "Oh wow, this guy knows what he's talking about."
Right.
He was a limited partner in 500 and something units, but that gave us the credibility as a team to be able to execute this business plan. So now I tell people, like even the ones that want to be the operators and the sponsors and the GP, they want to start out, like, look, just be an LP in a couple deals. You'll leverage those sponsors' credibility and on that deal, even if you're just a limited partner for the first 2 years. Like you'll be able to put that on your resume. Like, I'm a partner in 300 units, 500 units, and now I'm looking to become the sponsor. Like that's going to hold way more credibility than what I did, which is like kind of the dominoes of like single family, duplex, fourplex, 5 unit, right? Like that was like the long way. There's definitely a shortcut, and that's it, is be the LP first, uh, while you're getting all the education, do like 1 or 2 deals, and then your first deal, you're going to be taken way more seriously with lenders, with brokers. So that's my tip there for lesson learned on what I did.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's a great tip, and I say that all the time, that just because you go as a limited partner, as a passive investor, doesn't mean that it's not going to lead and help you be an active investor, right? I think it's a
Yeah,
great, because
absolutely.
there's so much, like you said, you can use that track record, but it's also the experience you have of being involved in one of these deals, right? You see how the GP team works, what they do, how they underwrite, how they report, how they handle adversity. When do they send out distributions? What do those distributions look like? All these stuff, right? You're learning all the time, right? Just by being around that, and you're making connections with GPs at the same time. Because if you're giving someone money, right,
Yeah.
they're pretty happy, right? I'm sure any team that you give 50 to 100 grand to, you're going to make a somewhat of a connection with them, and you're going to be able to be around that as well. So it's definitely sharpens that learning curve, I think, right? It steepens that learning curve a lot, I think. So I think that's a great point. With a portfolio, I think you were talking about this before. You guys have, what kind of size units are you guys been buying mostly?
So right now we're pivoting mostly. In last year, it was
Yeah.
C class, 50 to 80 units was really our target market, our target property. Going forward, the C class, we're trying to move away from it for a couple reasons. There's the you hear the words like flight to quality and stuff like that. We're kind of on that ship of the flight to quality, mainly because of how rocked the tenant base, the resident base that are in C class properties. Those are going to be a lot of your labor force, a lot of your workforce housing type. So everybody that got rocked in 2020 with COVID, your restaurant workers, your laborers, and things like that. They got actually rocked in as all the shutdowns and everything like that for their economic stability. So the C class got hurt the most last year. And then, so that's kind of putting downward pressure on the income potential of those properties. And then on the other side of it, you're getting squeezed because now these properties, you're talking 60, 70-year builds, 1970s builds, you're having this CapEx kind of creep up, like huge underground plumbing issues, huge wiring issues, all these, structural issues that are coming to the end of their, 50-year lifespan are all coming due. And these aren't cheap. We're looking at a property right now that we're looking at $700,000 in plumbing repairs because it's a 1972 build on a slab, plumbing's cast iron. Like nobody wants this problem, but it has to get done. So like who's going to solve that problem? And so not only is the income potential going to get lessened, or has been depressed, then also the CapEx that's growing up. So that C class, we feel like it's getting squeezed a lot. So we're choosing to move up a little bit higher to maybe like that B minus, B class range, even though they're more expensive. We think in the long run, it'll be a lot better purchase and acquisition for our portfolio. So right now we're looking at kind of that 50 to 200 unit B class, B minus class property. So 80s, maybe early 90s, if we can afford it, in markets that are growing. So definitely Sunbelt markets, just like everybody else. We find are great, Texas, Carolinas, things like that. We absolutely love that. But we're also looking at the kind of the black swan markets. There's some in the Midwest, like the Kansas cities, that are kind of just popping up out of nowhere. That are having this huge economic booms. Mainly driven by people fleeing like New York and California, companies fleeing New York and California, looking to set up in these tax advantage states. So those states are like open arms, like we'll give you all the tax breaks you want. Come bring your 4,000 employees or something like that. So we're keeping a close eye on those type of markets as well. That maybe it's not as sexy as like an Austin or something like that, but it's like a secondary market, tertiary market that's just they're on the launch pad and they're growing. The mayors there that in those towns are really doing huge economic plans going forward in the next 5-10 years. That's kind of what we're looking for. So yeah,
that's very cool. Stuff. Yeah, that's really cool. That's cool, and I think you're right as well. Like I was speaking to Bill Ham. I don't know if you know Bill.
Yeah, the tsunami. Yeah, the CapEx tsunami. That's what
he calls it. Yeah. He talks. Yeah, he was talking about that, and that's going to cause a lot of problems for people. That it's just all this stuff is coming to the end of its life cycle, right? And it's going to cause a lot of major issues for a lot of owners, and it's going to put a lot of people maybe in trouble. There could be some good opportunities for people there. But something you talked about off air before was a problem that you've been able to solve, right? Because you guys talked that we were looking at properties in that 60 unit, and you guys had bought some in that place. And the problem with that is that the challenge with that is it's not big enough to have on-site management a lot of time, to have them on payroll, to have on-site management on payroll and maybe an on-site handyman or whatnot with it. So you're in that space where it's too big for a third-party property management company to handle just by being completely off-site, but it's not big enough to have someone completely on-site all the time. But you guys have found a way to be able to crush it and to be able to solve that problem, right? Do you mind sharing that, how you guys have been able to solve that problem?
Yes, I'll give you all of our competitive
all the secrets. Everybody take notes right here, right now, if you want to make a lot of money.
So we definitely leverage technology. So the people kind of put it into frame here. So the people we're buying from in that size range are usually not your super sophisticated, investment firms, because they're too small. So mainly these are your mom and pop buyers. Maybe it's a doctor or something like that, or a developer. We buy a lot of stuff off developers where they built this property in like the 70s or 80s, and they were going to give it to the kids now that they're coming of age, and the kids are like, we don't want this thing, just sell it and give us our $1 million, right? And we've actually bought our last 2 properties was that exact scenario where the father was the developer and thought he was building this legacy for the kids, and kids just want the check. He's like, okay, well, let's sell it, right? So it's very, very much kind of family-owned properties that really don't have the sophisticated systems. They're not really up to date on the technologies being offered. So we look at their expenses, and they're just like super high expense ratios, like 60%, north of 60% OPEX ratios, which on average should be, closer to that 50% range. So things that we do, we immediately get rid of the on-site management usually, and we turn that office space into another convertible unit, we convert it into another unit. So now we just boosted the NOI, whatever, $5,000 a year from that. Now to solve the problem of the offsite management, we try to, multiply their effectiveness. We do a lot of Facebook advertising. That's not new, but most of these people in this this size range don't do Facebook Marketplace or lead ads or anything like that. So just the marketing is just very, paltry. They don't want to put the money into marketing. We look at their marketing budgets like $500 a year, and it should be like, $500 a year or like $100 a year, like per property, right? Or per unit. I mean, yeah. So marketing budgets are usually pretty bad. To leverage the offsite management, we do things like Rently and Codebox. So Rently and Codebox, what they do is they do self-showing technology. So they put a box on the door. The applicant will see the ad. They're given a link to go register at this register a self-showing. The app will vet this person. They'll get their driver's license, get their ID, make sure they're verified their identity, do a deposit hold, so they're not going to just get access to the property and just wreck it. So they have their credit card on file. They're given a one-time unique code. They can do a self-showing at the property. They walk in and they're not pressured. It's not like a leasing agent standing behind them. That's usually uncomfortable, right? Is you go toward this thing that might be your new home and you got this person like standing behind you, breathing on your neck, like, are you going to sign the lease or something like that? So they can go through at their own pace, their own comfort. And then they immediately after they get automatically sent a link to the application. So it's a lot of automated steps here. They fill out the application and they can move in. We do everything is online, so we don't accept any kind of cashier's checks, personal checks, anything like that. All tenants or residents must do the online portal, which some of them, if they're not tech savvy, they get they gripe a little bit, but they usually get used to it because then they do auto pay. They can submit their maintenance tickets online and ultimately allow us to do better serve them by getting maintenance issues tracked better and handled better. Finances are better. So all that stuff is pretty cheap to do. So Rently, Codebox, remote showings, online portals. We do Matterport scans and 3D tours. So again, that's something you see on high-end properties. Look at A-class properties. They probably have some kind of virtual tour where you can sit at your computer and walk through this apartment and get the kind of that virtual tour from your couch. Well, that technology to do like a Matterport scan is getting a lot cheaper, just like technology does. So spend a couple $100 or even a grand to go do drone shots, to go do Matterport scans, even if it is a small 8-unit property, because your competitors aren't doing that. It's going to be iPhone 4 pictures with the shades down, like that's when you look at your competitors in the market on these kind of mom and pop properties, like the marketing is just horrible. So if you just spend even a little bit of money on like good pictures, like a professional photo shoot, Matterport scans, which is the 3D kind of virtual tours, drone shots, virtual staging is another one of our kind of hidden tricks. You go get do a picture of a living room and it's just like a blank square. So a lot of residents, they can't literally picture their stuff in that space. So you go spend $20, go get a virtual assistant on Fiverr or Upwork, $25, and they can put furniture virtually in that room and design that room virtually. And you put that on, your boosted Facebook ad, your leads are going to explode versus, again, your next competitor down the street or across the street is the same 8-unit with, an iPhone 4 from 2004 picture that they just keep recycling, and when you're looking at the, what's attractive, if you were in the shoes of, the applicant or the person browsing, like you're absolutely going to crush them. And I promise you, you're just by doing that, just by doing virtual staging, professional photos, boosted Facebook ads, you're going to be, you're probably going to have a 400% increase in lead generation, qualified leads versus, what you were doing before. So there's just a couple tips there on having to do. And again, none of that is anybody being on site, right? Nothing's on site. So, and then all that entire funnel is without anybody being there. We funnel them through the Rently. They can do virtual showing. The only time person is actually there and present is actually lease signing, like that final walkthrough, doing the damage report and everything like that, the acceptance. A leasing agent will be there for that. But by then it's already structured. It's an appointment. They can make the drive for that, hand them the keys and do that. And then one of the other things I look for to make sure we're successful is property managers that are virtually integrated. Now, what that means is, do they have maintenance teams in-house, like on payroll? Because that's going to be vital to the success of this kind of strategy. because a lot of property managers don't have anything. They're essentially real estate agents with a side hustle, right? That's absolutely who you want to avoid. You want a property manager that is trained to be a property manager, that has, education like a CPM or something like that, and they are vertically integrated. They have in-house leasing agents, in-house or on staff, on payroll handyman, on payroll electricians and plumbers. Maybe not HVAC; they're kind of more specialized, but at least a plumber, an electrician, a handyman that can handle 99% of the problems that are going to come up in an apartment unit. They can handle, because otherwise you're going to be bled dry by maintenance requests. So you look for property managers that are vertically integrated as well. So those are some of the tips I have on how we were able to do 300 units with 0 on-site property managers.
I'm taking notes over here. I'm going to go back and listen to this again. I'm stealing some of these tips for sure. That's really cool, man. I appreciate you sharing all that. And it's cool, and all your success, man, is cool, and it's like, to be working a full-time job and to have done all this as well is really fascinating. Out of interest, how much time a week do you think outside of your full-time job do you spend on real estate?
Lately, since we've been in acquisition mode, it's a lot. Probably like 20, 30 hours while we're in, because we've been in like underwriting, like closing for like the last like 14 months. So when we currently don't have a deal that we're underwriting and we're under contract on, and we're just kind of just cruising, I would say probably like, I don't know, maybe like 10 hours a week, maybe 1 or 2 hours per property. And we have 5 or 6 properties now. But once you're like in due diligence phase, it's kind of, you're just burning the oil.
Yeah. It's go time, right?
Yep.
That's when it's go time. Well, man, hey, I appreciate you taking the time to share your story. It's really cool what you've achieved. And again, it's, kind of the tip of the iceberg, right? There's a lot more to come, I'm sure, no doubt about that, especially when you won't have your full-time job to sort of take away your time. You'll have even more time to focus on real estate. So it'll be cool to see what you're able to achieve in the future, no doubt. But as this show is called Wrestling with Real Estate, I like to incorporate some wrestling-related real estate questions. And the first one is, what would your wrestling name be?
All right, thought about this for a minute. So because I'm a career assistant advisor, I think The Advisor would be a cool name.
Okay, I like that too. I like that.
You've been advised.
Yeah, when you win the match, you can stand over and be like, you've just been advised. Okay, I like that. Every wrestler has a special move. What is your special move in real estate?
Yeah, so I think, in real estate, oh man, I was thinking of like actual moves. I was like, man, the stunner that's literally what I've been thinking about this whole time. I was like,
what is your biggest strength, essentially, is what I'm asking.
Yeah, so I think building teams is something that I gravitate to. In the military, I've been kind of groomed for the last 14 years to build and manage and lead small teams. So I think I've been pretty good at that, and I think that's probably my biggest strength. I bring to any team I form is to be able to build these and manage successfully these remote, geographically separated teams. Right, I got a small team in Michigan that I'm managing from Honolulu. I got a small team in Texas, in Virginia, and I formed and managed these teams all from being remote because of my military experience and being able to just pick the right people, put in those, give them the expectations, train them, give them those key performance indicators, and be able to manage them remotely.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a huge strength, I think, because that's how you really scale, right? If you have to do everything yourself, it's hard to scale. But if you're able to build teams and bring on good people and train them and create expectations, and from there you can scale so much more. So that's awesome. What's been the biggest body slam you've taken in your real estate career?
The biggest body slam, I think it has to be those 4 units, right? I think is getting that clarity. Like once I actually got a mentor and like, what are you really getting after? What's your why? What's your end goal? Because at that time it was just kind of just acquire. And then my mentor was like, what's the end goal here? And then going through that exercise, like, okay, getting to that 20,000 unit or $20,000 a month cash flow, and then seeing where I was and what my path was. And then realizing that it's going to take me, decades to get there on the path I was currently on. And then going to the bank and watching, $300,000, which at the time at 24 years old, or 25 years old, was like just vaporized when I got those appraisals back. And like I had like on my net worth sheet, like I had, my guesses, and then each one of them came back at like, 30-40% under what I thought it was going to because of the comp value approach. That was probably like the nausea I felt of like, okay, this is a really bad problem. How am I going to solve this? That was probably the worst one. And again, it's not bad. It's still, a good problem to have. It wasn't like getting bankrupt or anything like that or losing a bunch of money. I've had, if you've been in this game long enough, you're going to have issues. Like I've had multiple people pass away in my units. I've had people, the worst feelings. The worst call I ever got was, January, my property manager's like, Vince, we've had a slip and fall on ice. If that doesn't just make your skin crawl and the stomach feeling that you get immediately, and ultimately we were able to get through that as well. But I think the one biggest setback was transitioning and going from the 4 units to the multifamily, knowing that my properties were worth a lot less than what I thought they were. So because of the comp value approach.
Yeah, but I'm sure it worked out in the long run as well because it drove you to larger multifamily, to that commercial. So was there a moment that you were standing on the top rope getting ready to jump, but you were too scared? What was it and how did you overcome it?
Yes, so I'm literally on the top rope right now. I'm standing on the top rope of a almost 15-year military career. On one side, I have, if I stick it out for 5 more years, I get a pension for life. Because if you spend 20 years in the military, honorably retire with a pension. Right now, I'm an E7, so an E7 rank pension at 20 years is not bad, knowing that I literally have to do nothing and I get a check deposited in my bank every month for the rest of my life. So that's on one side. The other side is being a full-time entrepreneur, and the roller coaster of every single day of being an entrepreneur, but knowing that the growth potential I have is huge over what I could ever possibly achieve in the military for my family. So I'm literally at the top rope, choosing to get out 5 years give up a 14-year, 15-year military career, 5 years left to the finish line, for the potential and opportunity I have to grow as a full-time entrepreneur is there. So it's mentally. Most people don't. They go towards security, towards safety when they have that itch. And a lot of my friends do. A lot of people in the military have this same feeling, and they stay in for that security of that pension. And nothing bad on them. It's the pension's nice, right? Medical for life, pension for life. It's definitely well earned and well deserved. But for me, my why is what is getting me to burn the ships and get me to take that jump and that leap off the top rope. Because my why is so strong, my goals are so big that I can't not make that jump. I'll be giving, I'll be letting my family down. This vision I have for my life, for my family, for my kids, it's just not achievable if I stay in the military. And that is so strong. It's my driver of every day that I have to do it. There's no choice. I have to make the jump.
Awesome, and that is a cool story. I appreciate you sharing that as well, because it, like you said, it's very easy to sit into comfort, right? Discomfort is where discomfort is where the challenge is, but that's where the growth is, and that's where the success is a lot of times. So I commend you for making that jump. That's awesome, man. This has been a fun conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time out there in Honolulu. You could be on the beach right now, enjoying the sun and everything. You're here talking to me, so I appreciate that. Oh, doing real estate deals, right? You're going to be doing that as well. But I appreciate you taking the time. But before we wrap up, if people want to reach out and get in touch with you, if they want to find out more about what you've got going on, how can they do so?
Yeah, so I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn. We have our website, connect at tricityequity.com, or email me at connect@tricityequity.com. And just reach out. I'm always available to talk shop.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, man, and good luck with everything that's coming up in the future. I'm excited. We'll have to have you back on in a few months and see how everything's going, how you transitioned, and what success you've had. But for the meantime, man, have an awesome rest of your day out there.
Absolutely. Thank you, Barry.